Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
Today we have a stack of 6 sources that take us from, well, the high-stakes arithmetic of India's democracy right down to the tragic consequences of viral social media clips. We should probably get straight into it.
Yeah, we're skipping the pleasantries today because we're looking at a stack of sources that are essentially a blueprint of India's anxieties, from the arithmetic of our democracy to the psychology of a digital mob.
It's a heavy stack. We have editorials, we have ground zero reports, and then we have these spotlight features. We're talking about the structure of parliament, the fragility of a person's reputation in the smartphone age, and even the literal grass beneath our feet.
Let's start with the big one. The editorial section calls it a ticking time bomb. The title is The Moral and Political Arithmetic of Indian Delimitation. Now, to the average person, delimitation sounds like, I don't know, boring bureaucratic filing.
It sounds like someone drawing lines on a map in a basement, doesn't it?
Exactly. But you're arguing this is actually the most dangerous event on the Indian political horizon.
I think the source material makes a terrifyingly convincing case that it is, without exaggeration. Delimitation is just a fancy word for redrawing the electoral map. But the core point here is this. If we do this strictly by the numbers, by pure population, we might just break the emotional contract that holds the north and south of India together.
Okay, let's back up for a second. Because to understand why this is a bomb, we have to understand why the timer was paused in the first place. The source mentions this deep freeze on seat distribution since 1976. Why that year? 1976 feels very specific.
Context is absolutely everything here. So it's 1976. The emergency is in full swing. The central government under Indira Gandhi is, well, it's obsessed with one major policy goal: population control. There was this genuine, almost Malthusian fear that India was going to breed itself into starvation.
Right. This is the era of mass sterilization drives, the Hum Do Humar Do campaign. It was a very aggressive, very top-down approach to family planning.
Exactly. So the central government sends out this clear message to all the states. Lower your birth rates, get your fertility numbers down. And the southern states, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, they listened. They really took it on board.
They invested in education, women's empowerment, set up health clinics.
Right. They did the work, and their birth rates started dropping. But the northern states, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, they didn't, or maybe couldn't, slow down as fast.
Yeah.
Their populations just kept exploding.
And here's the perverse incentive, isn't it? In a democracy, your representation is based on your population. So if you determine parliamentary seats purely by headcount, the states that failed to control their population get more seats, and the states that succeeded get fewer.
Precisely. It's a total moral paradox. The government realized this even back in the 70s. They couldn't go to the South and say, congratulations on listening to us and fixing your fertility rates. As a reward, you now have less power in Delhi.
That would be political suicide.
Total suicide. So they froze the seat allocation based on the 1971 census. They essentially hit pause on democracy's math, saying, we'll wait until everyone catches up.
So we put democracy in a deep freeze. But the ice is melting. The source says the freeze effectively expires with the first census after 2026, which is the 2027 census. And now the disparity is massive. The catch-up just didn't happen.
No, the gap widened. The divergence between the demographic trajectories of the North and South is now a canyon. And the numbers here, they're frankly staggering. If we redistribute seats purely based on today's population projections, Uttar Pradesh's seat count in the Lok Sabha could jump from 80.
80 to what?
To 151.
151 for one state. That's nearly double.
It is nearly double. Just to give you a sense of scale, that is more seats than many countries have in their entire parliaments. And look at Bihar, it goes from 40 seats to 82.
Okay, and the flip side of that coin, what happens to the South?
Well, this is where it gets a little tricky. Tamil Nadu would technically see an increase in its absolute number of seats because the whole house is expanding. But its proportion of power, its share of the pie, drops significantly. It would go from having a 7.2% share of the House down to about 6.0%.
And Kerala?
Kerala drops even more dramatically, from 3.7% down to 2.6%.
That feels like a punishment for good governance. It's like saying, congratulations, you educated your population and lowered birth rates, so now you get less of a say in how the country is run.
That's exactly how it would be perceived. And the source warns that if just 2 states, UP and Bihar, command over a quarter of the Lok Sabha, the bargaining power of every other region just evaporates.
It's not just math at that point.
No, it's about the survival of the North-South Compact. If a political party can win a national election by sweeping just the Hindi heartland, why would they ever need to pay attention to the specific needs of Chennai or Thiruvananthapuram, the incentive structure is gone.
I do want to play devil's advocate here for a moment, though. The fundamental tenet of democracy is one person, one vote. If there are more people in UP, shouldn't they have more representation? Why is it fair for a voter in Kerala to have effectively a heavier vote than a voter in Lucknow?
And that is the core democratic argument, and it's a completely valid one. If you look at it purely as an aggregation of individuals, then yes, the North should have more seats. But the source argues that India isn't just a democracy of individuals, it's a federal union of states. It's a contract. The southern states entered this union with the understanding, or at least the hope, that they wouldn't be completely swamped by the demographics of the North.
So we're torn between these two principles, democratic equality versus federal balance.
Exactly. As the article says, and I think this is a great line, the census will measure India's population. Delimitation will measure its democracy. If this is driven by arithmetic alone, it could redraw the moral balance of the entire republic.
So what's the fix? The article outlines 6 different options, and we should probably go through them because most of them seem to have, well, fatal flaws.
Right. Option 1 is the simplest. Just extend the freeze again. Kick the can down the road another 20 years.
But can you really run a democracy in 2027 based on population data from 1971? That sounds constitutionally dubious.
It invites a legal challenge for sure. You're essentially disenfranchising millions of young people in the North whose votes are underrepresented.
Okay, so option 2 is to expand the parliament size, which we're already doing with the new Vista building, but that doesn't solve the proportional loss for the South.
Right. Even if everyone gets more seats in total, the South still has a smaller slice of the pie. Their influence is diluted.
Precisely. Now, option 3, the weighted formula. That's where it gets interesting. A bit more sophisticated.
Right. It borrows from how we handle money with the Finance Commission. Yes, exactly. When the Finance Commission gives tax money to states, they don't just look at headcount. They reward states for fiscal discipline and demographic performance. So the idea is to apply that same logic to seats.
So you'd say, okay, UP, you get seats for your population, but you maybe lose a few because your fertility rate is still high. And Kerala, you get some bonus seats because your literacy and health metrics are world class.
That's the idea.
Yep.
Maybe 70% or 80% of the seat allocation is based on population, but the remaining 20-30% is based on these development indicators. You balance raw headcount with a sort of governance bonus.
But imagine trying to sell that in a political rally in Lucknow. You don't get your full share of seats because your state didn't build enough schools. It's politically explosive.
Hugely. Which brings us to the more radical options. Bifurcation.
Just splitting up Uttar Pradesh.
Splitting UP into 3, maybe 4 smaller states. If UP's projected 151 seats are split among, say, 4 new states, Paschim Pradesh, Awadh, Bundelkhand, and Purvanchal, then no single political entity has that kind of overwhelming dominance. It neutralizes the hegemony issue.
You divide to create balance. It's a fascinating thought. And finally, there's the Rajya Sabha idea.
Right. To reform the Rajya Sabha, the upper house, to be more like the U.S. Senate. Right now, our Rajya Sabha also leans on population. The suggestion is to give every state equal representation, or at least tiered representation, regardless of size. That would make it a true federal check on the power of the more populous lower house.
It seems like we have to choose between a kind of strict mathematical democracy and the federal spirit of the union. It's a very sobering thought.
It is. This is not just a bureaucratic exercise. The source is clear. This is about the survival of the union itself.
Let's pivot from those domestic tensions to global ones. Our second editorial is about the upcoming Republic Day in 2026. The chief guests are Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa from the European Union.
And this is a really significant signal. The article frames it as the dawn of a new India-EU multipolar order. The context here is crucial. It's largely driven by a strategic shift away from the United States.
The source mentions friction with President Trump. We've seen this movie before, but it seems the sequel is more intense. Punitive tariffs and some really heated rhetoric.
Yes, the source is very specific. It mentions accusations of Modi's war in Ukraine coming directly from the Trump administration, along with intense economic pressure. It seemed to have led both India and the EU to a shared realization. They used to have what was called strategic patience with the U.S.
And now
they're moving to strategic autonomy.
That's a buzzword we hear a lot in foreign policy circles. Strategic autonomy. What does it actually mean in this context on the ground?
It basically means I need to be able to survive if my best friend suddenly decides to stop answering my calls. Or even worse, if my best friend starts throwing rocks at my windows. For a long time, India and the EU both looked to the United States as the ultimate guarantor of global stability. But they're realizing those alliances aren't guarantees anymore. They need a third pole in the world order.
So what's actually on the table for this visit? What are they trying to achieve?
The big ticket item is the Free Trade Agreement, the FTA. It's been stalled since 2007.
Wow, since 2007, that's nearly 20 years of deadlock.
An incredible amount of time. If they can finally unlock this, we're talking about massive boosts for Indian textiles, pharmaceuticals, and the auto sector. But there's a huge hurdle.
Right, this Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, it sounds complicated.
It is the elephant in the room, or maybe the carbon cloud in the room.
So explain CBAM to me like I'm a steel manufacturer in Tadanagar.
Okay, so you make steel in India. Use coal energy, which is pretty carbon intensive, but it's cheap. You want to sell that steel to Volkswagen in Germany. The EU turns around and says, wait a minute. Our steel makers in Europe have to pay huge taxes to lower their carbon emissions. Your steel is dirty and cheap. That's unfair competition.
So they just slap a tax on it at the border?
A massive one. The article says it's effectively a 20 to 35% carbon charge on Indian steel and aluminum that enters Europe. From India's perspective, this is a non-tariff barrier. It's protectionism disguised as environmentalism.
A 35% tax would wipe out your profit margin instantly.
Completely. The success of the entire FTA hinges on whether Europe can offer some kind of relief on this, maybe a waiver or a long delay, while still keeping their own climate goals intact. It's a very tricky needle to thread.
And beyond trade, the article also mentions defense.
Correct. The EU apparently wants a security and defense partnership with India on par with what they have with Japan or South Korea. For India, this is about making India co-producing equipment so we aren't relying solely on Russian or American security guarantees. It's all about diversifying the portfolio of national security.
So it sounds like India is trying to hedge its bets in what feels like a very, very volatile world.
That is the textbook definition of strategic autonomy. It's an insurance policy against geopolitical chaos.
Moving from the global stage to adjust. A heartbreaking story from Kerala. This is from the Ground Zero section. It's about a man named Deepak. And honestly, this was the most difficult read in the stack today.
It is a profound tragedy, and it really highlights the dangers of digital mob justice. Deepak was a 42-year-old man described in the article as quite introverted, living with his elderly parents. On January 18, he was found dead by suicide.
And this was all triggered by a video, a clip that probably lasted only a few seconds.
Yes. A psychologist and social media influencer named Shimjitha Mustafa posted a video online. In it, she alleged that Deepak had sexually harassed her on a bus, specifically, that he elbowed her intentionally. She filmed his face, she put it online, and the clip went viral almost instantly.
And in the age of social media, an accusation like that is a sentence in itself, isn't it? It travels faster than the truth ever could. But here's the twist. And it's an incredibly painful one. The police reviewed the bus's CCTV footage.
They did. The remand report, which the article quotes, states that the police found nothing abnormal in the footage. Fellow passengers and the bus staff also confirmed that no harassment took place. It seems it might have been accidental contact in a very crowded space, or perhaps nothing at all. But by the time that truth came out,
the damage was done. The digital verdict had been delivered.
It was too late. The report says Deepak was devastated. He was already in a fragile state, recovering from a divorce, and was very close to his mother. The public humiliation was apparently too much for him to bear.
And now, the pendulum of public outrage has just swung aggressively in the other direction.
Completely. Mustafa has been arrested for abetment to suicide. But the social reaction has been extreme. We're seeing men in Kerala protesting by wearing cardboard boxes on buses.
The cardboard box protest, that is such a powerful, bizarre visual.
It is surreal. You have men literally wearing cardboard cartons over their torsos. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a manifestation of pure fear. They are saying, I am so terrified that an accidental touch will destroy my life that I will dehumanize myself into a parcel to avoid it.
It represents a complete breakdown of trust between genders in public spaces. The very idea of sharing space becomes fraught with danger.
It does, and it has sparked this fierce, really complicated debate. On one side, you have the digital mob that wants to deliver justice in minutes. On the other, you have feminist activists who are now divided. Some argue that suicide, while tragic, doesn't automatically invalidate an accusation of harassment, which is a real and pervasive problem.
But others are condemning what they see as the weaponization of social media without any proof.
Right. There's a quote in the source from one expert that it nails it. The danger of reckless shorts delivering justice in minutes, with the cost paid in human lives.
That's the key takeaway, isn't it? In a place like Kerala, which boasts near 100% digital literacy, we're seeing the social contract being stretched to its breaking point. The legal process is slow. It takes months, even years, but the digital verdict is instant and it's irreversible. You're guilty until proven viral.
It's a terrifying reality.
Let's move from there to Odisha, where we see a different, more physical kind of vigilante justice. This is from the Spotlight section, Shadow of the Vigilante.
This is the story of Sikh Mukandar Muhammad, a 35-year-old Mason. On January 14th, 2026, he was lynched by a mob.
And the details are just harrowing. Again, the context here really matters. He wasn't a professional cattle trader, was he?
No, not at all. He was a daily wage mason. It was Makar Sankranti, a holiday, so all the construction work had stopped. He was in desperate need of money. The article mentions he had a debt of 90,000 rupees and a bedridden father to care for, so he took a one-off job driving a pickup van.
And the van was carrying fish and allegedly some cattle, and he ran into a group of so-called Gau Rakshaks, or cow vigilantes.
Yes. Videos apparently circulated showing him being brutally beaten and forced to chant Jai Shri Ram. He died later that afternoon. But what's really disturbing here, according to the source, is not just the violence of the mob, but the systemic response to it.
The police response seems, well, complicated is a polite word for it. The source implies something more like collusive.
The source definitely notes a pattern. The police initially treated it as a smuggling case gone wrong. In Odisha, these vigilante groups often intercept vehicles, beat the drivers, and then they call the police. And the police, in many cases, record the vigilantes in their reports as informers or social activists rather than as attackers.
So they arrest the drivers, the victims of the assault.
Yes. The vigilantes are essentially operating as an extra-legal enforcement wing, and the system seems to, at times, legitimize them.
So after this murder, what was the state's response?
Well, instead of a major crackdown on the vigilante violence, the state launched a massive series of raids on cattle smugglers, seizing cash and gold.
That feels like a deliberate distraction. Look over here at the smuggling problem. Don't look at the dead body.
It pushes the murder to the margins of the story. It frames the victim, Mukandar, as a criminal first and a victim second. The source even quotes a minister saying that cow protection is linked to religious sentiment and asmita, which means pride.
Which effectively legitimizes the sentiment behind the violence, even if they formally condemn taking the law into your own hands.
Exactly. It sends a very mixed and very dangerous signal. In the middle of all this political maneuvering, you have a family that has been left in absolute ruin. Mukandar's wife and his infant daughter are now facing not just poverty, but also social stigma. It's a tragedy that's compounded by what the source portrays as state apathy.
From the politics of humans to the politics of nature. Let's look at the Hesaraghatta grasslands near Bengaluru. This piece is fascinating.
It's a really interesting ecological battle, and it challenges our very definition of what nature is supposed to look like. If you go to Hesaraghatta, you might just think it's a dry, scrubby, kind of boring landscape. People often call these kinds of places wastelands.
Right, because it's not a lush, green, dense forest.
Exactly. We have this deep-seated bias that green and tall equals good nature and brown and scrubby equals wasted land. The government's own Wasteland Atlas actually classifies these areas as bad inputs, as land that needs to be developed.
But that's a complete misconception, isn't it?
A huge one. This area was almost lost. It was slated to become a film city or a theme park. But after a long fight in January 2025, it was finally declared a conservation reserve. And the reality is it's a vital carbon sink and an incredible biodiversity hotspot.
The source mentions some really amazing wildlife, the lesser florican, the slender loris.
And the harriers, this is the amazing part. These are migratory raptors, birds of prey, that fly all the way from Kazakhstan every year to this specific patch of grass in Bengaluru. And the article describes this incredible ecological connection.
Tell us about that.
So the harriers roost in the tall grass. They eat larks. The larks, in turn, eat grass seeds. When the harriers regurgitate pellets, which is what raptors do to get rid of indigestible bits, they disperse those seeds all over the grassland.
So the birds are literally planting the grass. They're shaping their own ecosystem.
Precisely. If you lose the grass, you lose the larks, and then you lose the harriers. It's this incredibly fragile, interconnected web.
That is nature's engineering at its finest. But even with the conservation reserve tag, the source says it's not exactly safe yet.
Not at all. The visual descriptions in the article are stark. You have trenches that were dug to stop vehicles from driving in, but people just drive around them. You have beer beer parties, littering everywhere, and even pre-wedding photo shoots happening right in the middle of this sensitive habitat.
And there's also this problem of well-intentioned destruction, right? The idea of planting trees.
Yes, this is that green bias again. People, and sometimes even government agencies think, let's make this barren land better by planting trees. But planting trees in a natural grassland ecosystem actually destroys it. It changes the soil composition, it shades out the native grasses, and it drives away all the species that rely on an open sky.
So the solution is actually to do less, to manage it as it is.
The expert view in the article is that they need to remove those unscientific saplings and work on restoring the native grasses. It requires a huge mindset shift. You have to accept that a dry, open grassland is just as ecologically valuable as a lush forest. It's not a wasteland. It's a specific, delicate, and vital habitat.
Finally, we turn to Kochi, to the Konthuruthy colony, a story from the Spotlight section titled River in Ruin.
This is a classic, tragic conflict between environmental restoration and the very real human cost of displacement. We meet P.V. Joseph, a 72-year-old man. He's already grieving the loss of his son to cancer, and now he faces losing his home in the last 50 years.
The High Court has ordered evictions to restore the Konthuruthy River, but the residents claim it's not even a river.
That's right. They say it's a canal, and has been for decades. The court wants it restored to its original, much wider width. But the residents point out what they see as a stark class divide in how this is being implemented. They claim the boundary stones were placed askew.
What does it mean exactly? Placed askew.
They allege that the stones marking the eviction zone were carefully placed to target the homes of the poor in the colony, while conveniently sparing the properties of their much more well-off neighbors just down the way. There's a deep suspicion that the environment is being used as an excuse to clear out the poor.
And the rehabilitation package seems to be the main sticking point. The article says they are willing to move, but they simply can't afford to.
It's a math problem that is going to leave people homeless. The government's Life Mission housing scheme offers about 9.25 lakh rupees. But the actual cost to relocate and build even a basic home in that area is closer to 14 lakhs.
So there's a gap of nearly 5 lakh rupees per family.
Exactly. And these are daily wage earners, elderly pensioners. They don't have 5 lakhs sitting in a bank account. And the corporation is apparently struggling to find the funds to bridge that gap.
So you just have this clock ticking down to eviction day.
Yes. The deadline is looming. The article paints a picture of helplessness. You have elderly people like Joseph, filled with dread, and children who are anxious about losing their homes, their schools, their friends. It's a situation where the greater good of river restoration is falling squarely on the shoulders of the most vulnerable, who have nowhere else to go.
It's a heavy note to end on, but these are the stories shaping the daily reality on the ground, from the high tables of diplomacy and parliament to the mud of a colony in Kochi.
Absolutely. Whether it's the macro-level shifts that will define the country's future or the micro-level tragedy of a single viral video, the details always matter.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.